The shadow in the mirror. It was an ordinary Wednesday evening when Evelyn Harper's life changed forever. She had been sitting in her small, cozy living room, sipping tea, and watching the news as she did every night. The soft glow of the television bathed the room in a warm light, and the anchor's voice droned on about the day's events. Evelyn wasn't paying much attention. Her mind had been elsewhere, drifting through thoughts of her job at the library and her upcoming weekend plans. But then, something on the screen caught her eye, and the mug of tea slipped from her hand, shattering on the floor. There, on the screen, was a woman who looked exactly like her. Same chestnut brown hair, same delicate features, even the same mole on the left side of her neck. The news anchor was reporting that the woman had been caught on camera robbing a jewelry store downtown. Evelyn's heart pounded in her chest as she stared at the image, frozen in shock. How? How is that possible? She whispered to herself, unable to tear her eyes away from the television. The woman on the screen was wearing a black leather jacket and dark sunglasses, but there was no mistaking it. She was Evelyn's double. The news report continued, showing footage from the security cameras inside the store. Evelyn's doppelganger had walked in calmly, pretended to browse, then suddenly pulled out a gun and demanded the most expensive pieces from the display. The clerk had complied, handing over several diamond necklaces and bracelets before the woman made her escape. The police were already on the hunt for her, and the report urged anyone with information to come forward. Evelyn's mind raced. She had been at home all evening. There was no way she could have committed the crime. But how could she explain this to the police? They would never believe her. The footage was clear, and the resemblance was undeniable. She needed to find out who this woman was and fast. As the news moved on to the next story, Evelyn sat back on the couch, her hands trembling. She had heard stories of people seeing their doppelgangers before, but she had always dismissed them as urban legends. Could it really be possible? Was there someone out there who looked exactly like her? And if so, why was this woman trying to ruin her life? She knew she couldn't go to the police, not yet. They would think she was crazy, or worse, they might arrest her on the spot. She needed proof. Proof that this woman existed and that she wasn't just a figment of her imagination. With a deep breath, Evelyn made up her mind. She was going to find her doppelganger, no matter what it took. The next day, Evelyn called in sick to work. She couldn't concentrate on cataloging books when her entire life had been thrown into chaos. Instead, she spent the morning researching everything she could about the robbery. She combed through news articles, trying to find any clues that might lead her to the woman in the footage. But there was nothing. No one knew who she was, and the police hadn't released any leads. Frustrated, Evelyn decided to take a walk. Maybe some fresh air would clear her mind and help her think. She wandered through the streets of her quiet neighborhood, her thoughts churning. The more she thought about it, the more questions filled her mind. Who was this woman? Why did she look exactly like her? Was it just a coincidence, or was there something more sinister going on? As she walked, Evelyn's eyes scanned the faces of people passing by. Every time she saw someone with brown hair or similar features, her heart skipped a beat. She felt paranoid, like the woman could be lurking around every corner. But no matter how hard she looked, she didn't see anyone who resembled her doppelganger. Just as she was about to turn back home, something caught her attention. Across the street, in a small cough, she saw a woman sitting by the window. Her back was to Evelyn, but there was something eerily familiar about her posture, the way she held her coffee cup. Evelyn's pulse quickened, and she crossed the street, trying to get a better look. As she approached the cough, the woman turned slightly, and Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. It was her. The same brown hair, the same delicate features, her doppelganger. She was real, and she was sitting just a few feet away. Evelyn's hands shook as she stood frozen on the sidewalk, unsure of what to do. Should she confront her? Call the police? Her mind raced with possibilities, but before she could make a decision, the woman stood up, leaving a few bills on the table. She grabbed her coat and walked out of the cough, turning down the street. Without thinking, Evelyn followed her. She kept a safe distance, watching as the woman weaved through the crowd with a confidence that sent chills down Evelyn's spine. This woman was dangerous, she had to be. But why did she look exactly like her? Evelyn was determined to find out. For the next few hours, Evelyn trailed her doppelganger through the city. The woman seemed to have no particular destination in mind. She wandered from one shop to another, occasionally stopping to look at something in a window or grab a coffee. But there was something unsettling about the way she moved, as if she were always one step ahead of Evelyn, even though she never turned around. Finally, as the sun began to set, the woman entered a rundown apartment building on the edge of town. Evelyn hesitated for a moment, but her curiosity got the better of her. She followed her inside, climbing the creaky stairs to the third floor. The hallway was dimly lit, and the air smelled musty. Evelyn's heart pounded in her chest as she walked down the corridor, listening for any sound that might give her doppelganger away. She reached the door where the woman had disappeared and stood there for a moment, gathering her courage. With a deep breath, Evelyn raised her hand and knocked. For a few seconds, there was no response. Then, the door creaked open, and Evelyn found herself face to face with the woman from the news, the woman who looked exactly like her. The two women stared at each other in silence for what felt like an eternity. Evelyn's mind raced, trying to process the surreal moment. It was like looking into a mirror, But something about the other woman's expression was different, colder, more calculating. "Who are you?" Evelyn finally managed to ask, her voice barely a whisper. The woman smirked, leaning against the doorframe. "I was wondering when you'd show up." Evelyn's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't expected the woman to know who she was, let alone be waiting for her. "You know me." "Of course I do," the woman said, her voice dripping with confidence. "We're connected, you and I. More than you could ever imagine." "What do you mean?" Evelyn asked, her voice trembling. "Why do you look like me? Why are you doing this?" The woman stepped closer, her eyes glinting with something dangerous. "You really have no idea, do you?" Evelyn shook her head, her fear growing with each passing second. "Please, just tell me. I need to know." The woman sighed, as if she were disappointed. "Fine. You want the truth. I'm your twin." Evelyn's world tilted, and for a moment, she felt like she might faint. Twin? How could that be possible? Her parents had never mentioned anything about a sister, let alone a twin. "I don't have a twin," she said, her voice shaking. "My parents would have told me." The woman laughed, a cold, bitter sound. "Oh, they knew. They just didn't want you to know about me. I was the mistake they tried to forget, the child they abandoned." Evelyn's stomach churned. It couldn't be true. Her parents had always been loving and supportive. How could they have hidden something like this from her? "You're lying," she said, though her voice lacked conviction. The woman's smile faded, replaced by a hard, angry expression. "I wish I were. But it's the truth." "They left me behind, and now I'm taking back what's mine." "What are you talking about?" Evelyn asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've spent my whole life in the shadows," the woman said, her eyes narrowing. "Watching you live the life I should have had. The perfect family, the perfect job, the perfect little world. Well, now it's my turn. I'm going to take everything from you, starting with your identity." Evelyn's blood ran cold. This woman, her twin, wasn't just a criminal. She was dangerous, unhinged. And she was determined to destroy Evelyn's life. "I won't let you," Evelyn said, her voice stronger now. "I'll go to the police. I'll tell them everything." The woman's lips curled into a wicked smile. "Go ahead. See if they believe you. After all, I've already done a pretty good job of making you look guilty, haven't I?" Evelyn's heart sank. The woman was right. The footage from the robbery was damning, and without proof, no one would believe her story. But why? Evelyn asked, her voice filled with desperation. "Why are you doing this? What do you want?" The woman's smile faded, and for the first time, Evelyn saw a flicker of vulnerability in her eyes. "I want what I was denied. A life. A family. Everything you took for granted." Evelyn's heart ached with a mixture of fear and pity. This woman, her twin, had been abandoned, left to fend for herself, while Evelyn had lived a comfortable life. But that didn't justify the crimes she had committed or the danger she posed. "You don't have to do this," Evelyn said softly. "We can find another way. We can make things right." The woman's eyes hardened again, and she shook her head. "It's too late for that." Before Evelyn could say anything more, the woman slammed the door in her face, leaving her standing alone in the hallway. Over the next few days, Evelyn's life spiraled into chaos. The police had released her doppelganger's image to the public, and more witnesses had come forward, claiming to have seen Evelyn near the scene of the crime. Reporters began showing up at her apartment, asking questions and snapping photos. Evelyn felt trapped, like her world was closing in on her. She tried to explain the situation to her parents, but they were just as shocked as she was. They insisted that they had never known about another child, let alone a twin. But as Evelyn looked into their eyes, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were hiding something. Determined to get to the bottom of the mystery, Evelyn began digging into her family's past. She combed through old records, searching for any mention of a second child. Finally, after days of searching, she found what she was looking for. It was an old hospital record, dated the day of her birth. And there, in the fine print, was the truth. Evelyn hadn't been born alone. There had been 2 babies delivered that day. Twins. Her parents had lied to her. With the truth in hand, Evelyn confronted her parents. They were devastated, but they finally admitted the truth. Her twin sister, Emily, had been born with severe health problems. The doctors had told them that she might not survive, and they had made the heartbreaking decision to give her up for adoption, hoping she would receive better care elsewhere. But Emily had survived, and now she was back, determined to take revenge on the family that had abandoned her. Evelyn's heart broke for her sister, but she knew that Emily's actions couldn't go unpunished. She had to stop her before more lives were ruined. With the help of a private investigator, Evelyn tracked Emily down. It wasn't easy. Emily was smart, and she had covered her tracks well. But eventually, they found her hiding out in a small town a few hours away. When Evelyn confronted her sister, there was no anger, no accusations. Instead, there was only sadness. "I'm sorry," Emily whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't want to hurt you. I just wanted to be seen." Evelyn reached out, taking her sister's hand. "You don't have to hide anymore. We can fix this together." In the end, Emily turned herself in. The police were skeptical at first, but with Evelyn's testimony and the evidence they had gathered, they were able to prove Emily's involvement in the crime. She was sentenced to a few years in prison, but Evelyn promised to visit her to make sure she never felt abandoned again. As she walked away from the courthouse, Evelyn couldn't help but feel a sense of peace. The shadows that had haunted her life were finally lifting, and she knew that, no matter what, she and Emily would find a way to heal. Evelyn stood outside the courthouse, the autumn breeze gently brushing her face. The weight of the past few weeks felt lighter, but the road ahead was uncertain. Her sister, Emily, was no longer a phantom lurking in the shadows. She was a part of her life now, albeit under tragic circumstances. Despite everything that had happened, Evelyn felt a deep, unshakable connection to her twin. She wasn't going to let Emily slip away again. The next few months were difficult. Evelyn visited Emily regularly in prison, and though the atmosphere was cold and sterile, their bond began to grow. Each visit revealed more layers of Emily's pain, her feelings of abandonment, and the anger that had driven her to lash out. It wasn't easy for either of them. Emily struggled with guilt and shame, while Evelyn grappled with the complexity of loving someone who had tried to destroy her life. During one visit, Emily confessed more about her past. "I was alone for so long," Emily said, her voice barely a whisper, as they sat across from each other in the prison's visiting room. "The family that adopted me, they weren't kind. They made it clear I wasn't wanted. I spent most of my life trying to survive." Evelyn's heart ached for her sister. She reached out and took Emily's hand, squeezing it gently. "You don't have to survive alone anymore. We'll get through this together." Emily looked down, her eyes filled with regret. "I've done terrible things, Evelyn. I don't know if I can ever make it right." Evelyn shook her head. "We'll take it one step at a time. What matters is that you're here now, and you're not alone." As time passed, Emily's sentence was reduced for good behavior, and she was granted parole after serving 2 years. The day she was released, Evelyn was there waiting for her. They hugged tightly, the bond between them stronger than ever. Emily was still haunted by the past, but she was determined to start anew, and Evelyn vowed to help her rebuild her life. Together, they returned to the city where Evelyn lived, but not without challenges. The media had forgotten about the robbery, and people had moved on, but there were still occasional whispers. Some people recognized Emily, and the memory of her crimes hadn't fully faded. Still, Evelyn helped her sister find a small apartment and supported her as she tried to reintegrate into society. Emily found work at a local bookstore, a quiet place where she could begin to heal, surrounded by the kind of peace she had never known. Months passed, and slowly, Emily began to adjust to her new life. She attended therapy, worked diligently at her job, and, with Evelyn's help, began to piece together the fragments of her shattered past. They spent their weekends together, exploring the city, talking about their lives, and dreaming about the future. There were still moments of tension. Emily's past couldn't be erased, but Evelyn's unwavering support made the burden easier to bear. One evening, as they sat on the balcony of Evelyn's apartment, watching the sunset over the city, Emily spoke quietly. "I never thought I'd have this," she said, her voice filled with wonder. "A sister. A chance at something normal." Evelyn smiled, her heart full. "Neither did I, but I'm glad we found each other. You're part of my life now, and nothing will change that." Emily turned to look at her, her eyes shimmering with gratitude. "You saved me, Evelyn. In more ways than one." Evelyn shook her head gently. "We saved each other." Years went by, and though the shadow of their past lingered, it no longer defined them. Emily built a new life for herself, one filled with hope and redemption. She eventually went back to school, studying psychology with the hope of helping others who had been through difficult childhoods like hers. She wanted to make sure no one ever felt as alone as she had. Evelyn, too, found a new sense of purpose. The experience with her sister had changed her. She became more compassionate, more understanding of the complexities of human nature. She continued working at the library, but she also began volunteering at organizations that supported children in foster care, determined to make a difference. Their bond, forged in the most unlikely and painful of circumstances, became unbreakable. They weren't just sisters by blood, they were sisters by choice, united by a shared past and a commitment to a brighter future. And as they stood together, side by side, watching the world unfold before them, they knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. To sisters, once strangers, now inseparable.